advantage of that stuff to slide in and use it as cover
Mm-hmm.
to hide your mainly your noise and maybe their awareness of you coming in, you know. All right, next one, Dan and Mario. What do you notice are some key mistakes of up and coming beasts? Make once they understand the basic, like proper routes, don't hunt the wrong wind, the ability to find beds in whatever terrain we hunt. So
Probably one of the biggest mistakes when they're new is that they go in and find bedding and really don't get the setups down right. I think you need to know your axis well. You need to know what tree you're going to be in, or trees you have options of.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really have that down and get in and get out. Don't dwell there. Don't go in there and scout it and then come back a couple weeks later and cut shooting lanes and come back a couple weeks later and look at it. And I see that a lot. I mean, I've had guys I've scouted for where they tell you they got a big buck on the property and you go find it for them and show them where to set up. And they start sending you all these pictures of the buck and stuff coming in and out of the bedding area, and they start telling you, oh yeah, I was up there the other day and the trail moved over a little bit, should I move the stand? And it's like, get out of there, man.
Yeah, get out of there.
You know, you gotta walk gingerly with that stuff. What are some of the other mistakes?
I mean, any pressure in the area, I tell you what, starting out trying to do this stuff, picking your stand set once you get into an area is not an easy thing to do. And I think from my experience, it's the only way you get better at it is trial and error and just trying to think about and build patterns in how you're seeing deer. Early on, I've gone into spots, I've walked past probably the best spot, and then second guessed myself and then walked back to it and set up. Well, what have I done now? I've now crossed my scent across the scent trail that the deer is going to be coming in on. But I set up anyways, I learned from the mistake, you know, so then I think about that when I'm going in the next time. Or just, you know, just plain overthinking it. Like we talked about this earlier about cutting shooting lanes or looking at a spot and saying, well, where's the perfect, most comfortable spot that a human would want to sit? Because I can see over here and I can shoot over here. Well, you kind of got to change your mindset on that. You've got to think about where's the spot that navigates through this property that would provide the most cover and the most seclusion for a mature buck. And sometimes it's in that tree that's leaning like this and twists around, and you've got branches all around you, and you've got one little hole that you can shoot out of to an opening, and it's close quarters. So you need to, and really I've learned this from just walking behind Dan and observing the trees that he picks. Literally, like, he'll ask me, well, what tree did you sit on in this transition? I said, well, I picked that one over there. He's like, oh, well, I would have sat on that one that's bent like this and it's hanging over the swamp because you would have been able to see into that bedding where you saw that buck move. I'm like, you know, you're right. But, you know, you only learn that through experience.
I think, you know, there's a lot of factors that a guy who's new as a beast is going to make mistakes and we can go on for 10 days on it and not cover everything. But I think the biggest thing is that it takes time. One of the big ones is reading beds, understanding what you're looking at. They're going to hunt some bad beds. I mean, they're going to hunt stuff that I probably wouldn't hunt, that you probably wouldn't hunt. And the other big one is probably going to be equipment. I mean, you've got to get that equipment that you need to do the job that can get you in any tree, that can get you where you need to be. You have to learn that equipment, and you have to be good at it. I think you were lucky in the fact that you followed me and that I had the equipment. And
he says I was lucky, but I think jumping over giant logs, no, I'm kidding.
I threw you over some of them.
Yeah. Following is a broad term.
Yeah, we get a backpack, we fit you in, you can just sit up there with your crossbow while I'm walking in. But put an arrow in it.
Yes. No, that's a good point. The learning curve on your stands and your stick and getting all that set up, there is a learning curve there. And you're gonna, I mean, when I started out, I used to use a climber most of the time, you know, lone wolf hand climber, and I was picking those nice straight round trees that were in the middle of the islands and all that stuff. And yeah, my first, I remember practicing in my yard with the stands and the sticks, and how can I coordinate getting up there and then having my stand, setting my stand, and having my safety harness and my lineman's belt and everything all set up. And it just takes practice. You know, you're gonna sweat, you're gonna cling sticks together, you're gonna make noise, and then all of a sudden you start to figure out, okay, what's my rhythm or my pattern? I always hook my stick on my right side. I always carry my camera arm up with my left hand. When I step onto my stand, I always reach this hand with the tree, and you start forming a pattern. You know, I sit down, I turn around, I put my camera on, I get that strapped up, then I grab my bowstring and I pull it up and I turn and I sit, you know, and so it's, you know, you learn to work around what is presented to you for a tree and a spot because you just get more comfortable with your equipment, and that just takes practice.
You know, one of the big ones is probably learning from your experiences, both positive and negative. I think a lot of people go in the woods and they see a deer, and that's what they saw. I see an animal, and I'm thinking about how the wind is relating to it, why it's there, where it came from, where it's going. I'm thinking about coming back in spring and figuring out where it was bedded. I'm thinking about, you know, what's going on, what's the big picture here. And when I make a mistake, like I'm gonna stand and I get up, I slide to my feet and I turn to shoot, and that rubber boot that's wet squeaks against that cable, and that buck catches me. Maybe I still kill it, but it spooks. Maybe it doesn't even hear it, but I hear it, and I know what happened. You better bet that ain't happening again. Right. Something's getting done about it.
Right.
And I don't think everybody's there. I think a lot of guys think, well, that was a fluke mistake, that, you know, I got to make sure I don't put my boot there again. Well, when that buck's coming in there, I don't want to concentrate on where my boot's going. I want to concentrate on killing that buck. I'm making sure that ain't happening again. And it sounds so stupid because it's a little thing.
Right.
But if that stand creaks, I'm tracking down, why did it creak? Is there a washer in here that's worn out? Is it not lubed? I'm fixing the problems. Because when you got a season, here's what makes me different from the next guy that's learned all the tactics. Is we've got so many days to hunt, he's got so many days to hunt, right? I'm going to make one less mistake because I'm going to get 2 opportunities, he's going to get 2 opportunities, he's going to blow his 2, I'm going to kill my 2. Because I'm not going to make the mistakes he's going to make. That's the big thing, is you got to be on your toes with that, because you only get so many opportunities, you got to make them count. And you got to have that mindset that you're not going to let that happen. You can't be laxed on your setups. You've watched me, and I know you've commented on this. When I go in, I'm sitting back and I'm really observing where I'm going to sit, how I'm going to sit, what tree's going to give me the shot, how the wind's going to go, what's going to happen with the thermals and stuff. It's a chess game. And the guy who's got the wits about him to figure it out is going to win. And there's been setups that you've gone in where I would have went in there and I'd killed the deer, and you didn't. And I know that as a learning curve, if it ever happens to you again, you're going to kill that deer because you'll learn from that.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody learns from that. I think your average guy goes into that setup, doesn't understand why that deer's spooked. You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's burnt into your mind. That's why you know.
Because I set up 10 feet on the wrong side of the
10 feet because of the thermals.
Right.
And I literally wouldn't have been there. And I would have been in the kill tree. And I know it hurts you to even listen to me say that. But it should. Because that's what's moving you forward. And that's the mindset these guys got to have. You want to talk about mistakes? That's the mistakes. You got to take a mistake and learn from it. That's the biggest mistake, is they're not learning from their mistakes. That is the biggest one. And you got to keep moving forward. You got to keep adjusting. You get to be where I'm at by 35 years of mistakes. If you go through 35 years of mistakes and you're still hunting the same stand every day, you're still going out there doing the same things over and over and over again, you don't belong in this sport if you're trying to kill mature bucks. Because then you're just out there going, well, if I was on that property, Because that's what all you hear these guys talk about.
Yeah, I
is
mean-
they got to get on the great property. They got to have the food plots. They got to have this. It's
Right.
because they can't function to kill these things in their own environment. And I tell you what, if you're on the fence about this kind of hunting, you go out and you kill a big buck and you do it in a food plot, and you'll do it every now and then. They make mistakes. You'll do it. You'll have one of these kill plots that's close to bedding or whatever you do. You'll eventually kill a big buck or two, and you'll think what you're doing is great. But even if you only kill two doing what we're doing because you're still a beginner and you're working at, when you kill that buck, when you see a buck out there, or you hear a rumor about a big buck, and you know he's in the area, and you go and you map out the bedding, and you're like, I think he's in one of these 5 spots. And you go out there and you hunt number 1, he's not there. You hunt number 2, he's not there. And you see some sign over here, and you go, I think he's in 3 or 4. And you go into 3, and you're sitting there, and you're going, the bed's going to be under that tree. And up stands a giant buck. Not a giant, the giant. That's the buck you're there for. He stood up in the exact spot you thought he was going to be in. He gets up and he walks right to where you're expecting him to go, and you shoot him. There is nothing as rewarding as that. That ain't sitting on a food plot and some buck that you got a trail camera picture of once come walking by.
Yeah.
You know, that is planning, it's chess, it's hunting, and when it happens to you, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that with mature bucks, and it is a feeling of euphoria that you took a 6,000 acre swamp and figured out where that buck would be exactly, and he got up and came to you. And that ain't coincidental. What I'm doing ain't an accident. It's happening on purpose. And there's a feeling of power there. And it's a great feeling.
Yeah. And, you know, so I think it's, to what Dan was saying, it's just it's like anything in life that you want to pursue or get better at, be open to change, be open to trying a different way or a different technique, and you'll get better. You know, and don't obsess over it. Don't sweat the little things. If you bump a deer or you have a bad sit where it was just a bunch of mosquitoes and all you did is sweat, and you still learn something from it, still take something out of the sit, you know. So I think it's just some of like what Dan was mentioning that in his last part of what he was talking about, a lot of it's confidence too. You know, if you have done your homework and you're confident and you keep moving forward in a positive direction, you know, you're going to reach that goal and you're going to be successful. Recognize that there's going to be setbacks, and it's, you know, it's not a straight line path. It's
You know, you go on that a little too. These guys are asking questions in a manner of like they want to get to the point where I'm at, and that takes experience. It takes killing deer. It takes getting here. It takes getting here to be here, because I have a whole different mindset I have now than back when I killed a lot of those big bucks. I mean, you're always evolving as a hunter.
Yeah.
You're always changing, and some people never get to a certain point. Some people excel there, but you know, just my mindset. You know, I was being reminded of it by what you were saying. Just my mindset of like when a deer escapes me, like one comes in and I blow the shot, I laugh about it. I think it's funny, and I think, good for you, man. You got away.
Yeah.
You know, and half the time, you know, I respect these animals so much that I'm rooting for them. That ain't happening when you're 30 years old. It wasn't happening when I was 30 years old. And it's not the age thing. I'm saying at the point I was at 30.
Yeah, it's emotional maturity.
It's
where you're
because at that
Yeah.
point, I got to have success. Take your wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mario's pretty humble here. You don't talk about it much, but he was a big wrestler when he was younger. I know that when you were that big wrestler, you had to win. I mean, it would kill you if the wrong guy beat you or he got a good move on you. It's the same thing with the hunting. That young, aggressive guy, and you got to have that. I don't have that, and it's making me a better hunter, but you got to have that at some point in your life to give you that confidence, to give you that skill level. There's a progression, and you have to follow the path.
Yeah.
And it's like people always say, well, what if you could have changed this in the past? And people get mad at me on my answers when I say, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't even change the part where I was bad to my wife sneaking around hunting when I should have been home on our anniversary night or whatever, because hunting meant so much that I would skip an anniversary, I'd skip a kid's birthday, I'd never show up on Halloween for my kids.
Yeah.
I was a bad dad. But if I skipped that stuff, I wouldn't be the hunter I am now. I'm not saying people should be bad dads. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I like where I'm at. It all turned out good. It's probably some stuff I shouldn't have done in my life, but I've learned a lot of lessons and I'm moving forward. And sometimes you got to take that dirt path and you got to learn some hard lessons
Yeah.
to make you a good man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there, this quote, and another coach had said this, and heard it. It's, you know, in any pursuit, you should want to be successful or want to reach that goal, but you shouldn't necessarily need it. And I think, you know, what that's leading into is you know, should this thing control every aspect of your life, where you're just focusing on the prize, like you're just focusing on the fact that I want that trophy class animal on the wall. Well, that's honestly, that's like yeah, it's great, but that's the smallest part of it. For me, and Dan mentions this a lot too, it's the fun and the journey getting there. It's learning and looking back how you've learned the different ways of doing the hunting, the camaraderie that you have with hunting with your friends and someone else and sharing that experience. That's really the exciting part. I mean, obviously the closing moments of when you put that plan together and that buck coming in and you get it, but the real joy and I guess sense of achievement is all the work you put up into that point and reaching that goal. And you know, the same is with you guys that have been involved with sports or any sort of accomplishment at work or academics. You will get a better sense of accomplishment when you've put in your work, you've gone through trials and errors, you've had setbacks, and then you've had successes, and then ultimately you reach your end goal through persistence and learning and change, right? Versus, I mean, if I walk out and sit on the edge of the field and I get lucky and this giant buck's walk by and I shoot it, that's what it's going to be. But you know, I didn't learn anything new. It was lucky.
What really bothers me is when you see those angry hunters where they're just mad all the time and are upset about everything that goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and it happens, right? It's human nature because we put a lot of time and energy into something, and when things don't go our way, it's easy to have the negative thoughts. You know,
try and enjoy yourself a little bit.
Have fun with it.
If you're not enjoying it, if you're finding yourself mad and angry and jealous of your friends and stuff, back off a little.
Yeah, back off. Don't make it so important.
Right.
Look at it like. Truly ask yourself why you're doing it. I mean, we're supposed to have fun with this.
Yeah, I gave you some advice just recently, didn't I?
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah. I mean, everyone gets frustrated, right?
What did I say? I said that nobody really cares what you shot.
Yeah.
Right, and it's the hard reality of it. But you know what? If I didn't shoot a buck for the next 5 years, I bet you 90% of the hunting beast population wouldn't even know it. They wouldn't, because they're so caught up in their own lives and stuff. Yeah. They might realize I didn't get one that year, but you know what? I don't remember what Stan shot last year. I don't. He probably got a buck. I don't remember if Magic Man shot one. I mean, because that's not really my life. And if he didn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, but in your mind, you're thinking you're inadequate if you don't kill a deer. Killing a deer is not that important. You know what really matters to me? It doesn't matter what I got on my wall. It doesn't matter at all. What matters to me is the next one. Because my goal, my focus is on that next one. It really don't matter what the hell I shot. I mean, obviously that stuff helped me. It's given me a lot of confidence.
Right.
It's put me where I'm at. And at some point, as Dewey pointed out to me the other day, that I will want to look back on those deer and tell stories. And true. And when we're around a campfire, I do. But my focus is on the next one. I don't care about the last one. And if you're just worried about that next one, you'll do just fine. But don't do it to the point where you're abusing your friendships and stuff if you can help it. I mean, that's big. I mean, don't lie to your friends and stuff. If that's where it's going, you got to look at it as a problem. because this stuff can be as addicting as alcohol
As
or drugs.
anything else, yeah. And you see people getting squirrely and weird about deer, and but that's just true of any venue in life, So you got to put it all in perspective, and I like to have fun with it. Shooting mature deer is fun, but I, had a lot of fun when I was using different tactics and wasn't shooting big deer. But now, hey,
Actually,
I'll
it takes
take it.
kind of some of the fun out of it because you start thinking, well, I can't even go into the wind's wrong, or
Well, yeah. Again, you start putting pressure on yourself that you like, and at the end of the day, it's like whatever animal comes out, if the setup is right and you put the plan together and that buck comes out of bedding and you feel good about it, shoot the deer, man. You get a nice meal afterwards out of that deer, and you have a story that you can talk about for a lifetime, and that's a cool thing. So, all right, we got a few more questions on this page. We'll probably try to get through those and then
and call it.
see how much energy we got after that. My Red Bull's just starting to kick in, but I don't know.
I'm empty.
Yeah, you're empty. All right, Dan and Mario, when you guys are doing a scouting workshop, what kinds of things are you walking past and not really paying attention to that others would stop and evaluate?
Rubs in the middle of nowhere. Rubs in an open area where they don't matter. Deer sign where it don't matter. And I hear that a lot. I hear people in the workshops will say, I noticed that you walked by those rubs. I saw you looking that direction. You didn't say a word. And it's like, well, they don't really matter.
Yeah.
The sign's got to be where it needs to be. And what you'll see in the workshops is that I walk past a lot of terrain to go to certain terrain where it'll hold big bucks. That's what I'm concerned with. I think that last workshop we did was a really good one because we really got into some big buck areas that were real public and real, the land's pressured around. And that just drives home with me is how a lot of people were kind of amazed that we just walked right through all the woods and into the swamp and how nobody goes down there,
Yeah, I think it touches on what we talked about earlier, when do you think those rubs were made? When do you think those scrapes are made? How close in proximity are they to bedding? Because everything kind of subconsciously relates back to bedding. And just like I was talking about where Dan and I scouted those 5 or 6, 6 public properties, and I observed that, I see something, I see this parallel trail, and I'm looking for trails, and, Dan's already on the 2 points, and he's looking at those points for sign. And then he doesn't really see what he wants to see on those points, so he dives into the swamp, and he finds beds, but they're not the beds that he was looking for, and then he's like, I'm out of here, I probably, if I was there by myself, to be 100% honest, I would have been spending another... All right, so on to the next question here. So this one, Mario, looking through the old threads, I can see a rapid progression in skills and kills. Can you compare what you are doing 5 years ago as to how much and how you scout now versus then? All right, well, 5 years ago, I would say if you go back 10 years, my transition a lot has to do with getting out of my comfort zone. Comfort zone of how I was hunting and where I was hunting. Like most hunters, I shouldn't say like most hunters, but I had a couple specific spots that I liked hunting at. One was on some private property that was in my family. And when I was hunting it, I wasn't really thinking about wind. I wasn't thinking about how deer traveled or used the property. It was more about, this is what I learned over the last 25 years of having experience hunting on this property. Deer always come out in these certain points. I never really thought about why they were doing it. So I'd set up and I'd pound it. And a lot of it started out in permanent stands. We actually had ladder stands that were spread out across the property. Then I made the first transition to being mobile, so I got myself a lone wolf climber, and I started hopping all over the property, trying to play the wind more, trying to play fresh sign, but I still wasn't thinking about bedding. Like, how are they bedding on the property? It was more, in relationship to how they were. I thought they were using this food source here, and they were coming out of there to feed there, and I was trying to intersect them. And then, really, once I started working in the same building as Dan, and I started expanding on the properties that I was hunting. So get out of your comfort zone and go and scout areas that you always thought about scouting but never put in the time or effort to do it. So I started telling myself, well, yeah, you're really comfortable going and setting up on this piece of property that you know like the back of your hand, and it's real comfortable getting in, real comfortable getting out. You got to get outside of that comfort zone. You got to go sit in these spots that you don't know as well, that there's more unknowns getting in and getting out. And
what's important there too, not to interrupt you too much, but there's an important thing to be said there in the fact that when you went and started hunting other properties, you started figuring out how to be successful in other places, you start to relate that back to where else you hunt, and all of a sudden you're a better hunter on the property that you've known before.
right.
It made you learn. It forced you to.
Yeah. So I'd say mobility was the first step. Getting outside my comfort zone, so actually hunting a wider variety of properties. And then of course getting access to a couple, properties that on a regular basis had mature buck bedding and held mature bucks. Like Dan mentions this before. If you're hunting on a property that doesn't hold mature deer, you're probably not going to shoot a mature deer, But then it also made me realize that timing during the year and certain conditions and patterns, like how they move in hill country, made me hunt that that property that I'd been hunting my whole life more efficiently. So mobility, getting outside my comfort zone and doing more scouting on properties I normally would not have gone out and scouted on. Then transitioning from a climber to using stands and sticks, because that opened up a whole other realm. Now instead of just being able to hunt for trees when I go in and I'm like, oh, I think I want to hunt this spot, and I'm just looking at where the straightest tree is or where the proximity of a tree is that I can climb with my climber, now I'm going to where I think that kill tree is in proximity to the bedding. I have so many more options because I'm not hunting for trees to sit in, I'm hunting for the spot that is in proximity to that bedding. And then just really making the transition from, I'm a meat hunter, so I enjoy eating deer meat. My family grew up eating deer meat and hunting rabbits, pheasants, ducks, geese, and so making the transition to say, you know what, I want to commit to trying to shoot a mature animal. And by forming a friendship with Dan and convincing him that allowing me to tag along with him, I had the advantage is I was able to pick his brain, and he would give me feedback. He would say, try this, do this. And I just sucked it all in and tried to learn as much as I could. And I think the combination of those two things, honestly, if I didn't have an open mind and I didn't have Dan feeding me those facts and feeding me those techniques and tactics, I wouldn't have been able to be where I'm at right now. So it's a combination of me wanting to change and wanting to learn some new techniques and obviously having a good source, a good teacher to do it. So that's where I'd say I've made the transition, and now I just approach it much differently than I normally would. I realize the people that are really successful in this, I've had the opportunity in these podcasts to interview, quite a few guys that are successful doing it, and what I've noticed is the priority, commitment, and passion that they put into it. They leave a lot, no detail is not left unturned. And Dan talks about this with his years of experience that he has doing this, In a lot of other venues, they say you need 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. That's true for wrestling. It's true for other endeavors. But all these guys that I've interviewed during these podcasts, that same theme always comes out when they're talking. They have formed a pattern through learning of years of experience, and they document it, they record it, they take it very seriously because they're committed to it, and it's a goal that they want to be successful at. And again, it's like anything else. If you want to be successful at it, find a good mentor, a good teacher that you can learn from, that has had proven success in that area. Be open and willing to change. Recognize that you may have bad habits, you may have things that you're currently doing wrong, and accept that feedback. Make those changes and move forward, and you're going to be successful. The Beast is a great place for that. It's a wealth of knowledge if you want to learn about it. But, and I've also realized too that I put it in perspective because, I have a full-time job, I have a wife, I have 2 beautiful daughters, so there's a balance there. Can I spend every waking moment after work going and hitting those spots to scout and, doing weekends, logging all these hours, cataloging deer and deer movement? No, I can't spend every waking moment do that. There's got to be a balance between what my family and my career needs me to do versus what I enjoy doing in this recreation. And making them part of that definitely helps. So, yeah, you got to find that good balance for yourself. But it's probably a long-winded answer for that, but that's... All right. Next one here. Scouting efficiency. Dan, how do you scout a large area quickly? I've heard you say in the past that you've scouted parcels a couple thousand acres in size in a few days. And on the 9-finger thread, I haven't listened to the podcast yet. Someone mentioned you said don't leave 10 acres unturned. I assume covering lots of ground is simply speed scouting, and getting in depth is targeting a single buck. But could you go into greater detail of the whens, whys, and hows? I think most of us could benefit from being more efficient.
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as speed scouting goes, a lot of times you do a big property, you can expect the big bucks, and I talked about this a little earlier, to be in a certain percentage of that property, like the 10% or something. And you go straight to that terrain or that elevation, and you just scout that elevation. If it's hill country, you just scout that terrain. If it's swamp or marsh or whatever, you go into the spots where where the bucks should be, rather than going to the food areas or the funnels or scouting it inch by inch. And it kind of goes against the 5 or 10 acre rule that I talked about too. And when I talked about not leaving 10 acres unturned, what I was saying is when you got a big buck and you know he's in a certain area and you can't find him, is to make sure you throw a hunt at every section of that property. And that usually goes a little more towards private parcels or parcels where there's bedding everywhere kind of thing.
Right.
I don't hunt dead zones, but a lot of times you have a property where that buck could be holed up somewhere in that property, or he's in there somewhere, but he could be anywhere in there. You could be missing something. If you hit every 10 acres where you get a chance to get your eyeballs on everything, you're going to run across them. And that's different than scouting. That's actually hunting. That's moving in and making sure you cover everything until you find them, because you're hunting down an animal. It's a little different than the speed scouting.
Yeah. Yeah, and remember, I think too it could be concentrating on multiple bedding spots over a large piece of property too, right? Mm-hmm. So I relate this back to what I had talked about earlier when we were talking about. I took Dan along to scout some of those public spots this spring, and how he bounced around and scanned over those areas much more quickly, looking for key points, key trails, looking at what the bedding looked like. Was there sign, generational sign of rubs and trails and bedding going into these areas? And if there wasn't, then what's the point of walking around the property and looking at the other 40 acres of it if those other 40 acres are, you know, open timber or all the same topography, and there's no real niche spot that catches your eye on a topo map or an aerial map. So I think that's how you can take like 1,000-acre spot and you can narrow that down to 40 acres, and then maybe in that 40 acres you identify 20 acres that is a hot zone, and in that 20 acres, I think what Dan is saying, okay, now when it comes time to hunt that, every set that you feel is in that 20 acres, you need to make sure if you're onto a big animal that you throw a stand at it and leave nothing unturned, you know.
What's going to happen is if you don't unturn something and he's there, you're hunting wasted. You know, you're hunting spots where he's not, and by hunting there, even if he was there, now he's going to move because your scent's there.
Yeah.
You're narrowing it down. If you just keep moving into the spots that have the hot sign, if that buck's not living there and he's putting that sign down at night, you ain't killing him. If you got a buck in there and you want to kill him, you got to do that whole zone that you think he's in. You got to cover everything.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Dan. Got a couple more questions here. Identifying the primary bedding. Also, anything you have to say about details of this bed I want to hunt versus this is buck bedding but not one I'll key on?
Primary bedding, and that's what I really key in on, is generally, not always but almost always, an area that's got a lot of beds in a small area, and it's usually used all year. It's going to be a thick overlooked spot that nobody really bothers, and there's probably, let's say, it goes back to that spot where we hunted that 8-pointer last year, a small acre area. It's usually in that range, you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's usually in that area of about a half acre, or something like that, where there's beds spread out in there like crazy. There's usually, if there's a lot of big bucks around, there's going to be some good sign in a primary bedding area because there's going to be some competition for it, and there's going to be a lot of buck sign in there, and it's obviously a bedding area, and it's used year round. That's what makes it primary. There are spots where you get primary type bedding that only lasts a short period of the season because